Hello and welcome to this Learn at Home lesson. This is the second of two history lessons included in the Lower Key Stage 2 Learn at Home lesson pack. On screen now is a list of everything you'll need to take part in this lesson. When you see the pause icon appear on screen, pause the video and take a moment to think about the question I've just asked you. If you're working with someone, you can talk to them about your ideas. Do you have everything you need? Let's get started. We're going to learn about another British history hero. By the end of this lesson, you're going to know how Emmeline Pankhurst helped women to win the right to vote. If you were given the choice, where would you like your next class trip or family outing to be? Take a look at these three choices on screen and make up your mind. If you're working with your whole class or a group, then take a vote. If you're working at home, zip round quickly and ask everyone else at home what their choice would be. Count up the votes now. What did you vote for as a class or as a family? Oh, wait, I forgot to tell you the rules for voting. The rules are only boys can vote. Does this change the outcome of your vote? Do you think that's a fair rule? How do the boys feel about this rule? How do the girls feel about this rule? Pause the video now and think about these questions. I'm sorry I tricked you. It was only a bit of fun. Hopefully you'll understand as we continue through the slides for this lesson why I used that voting as an example, why I tricked you, and why I then asked you questions about whether or not it was fair. Let's carry on learning. Women have not always been able to vote. In the 19th century, many poor women had to work to earn money to feed their families, as well as doing all of the cooking, cleaning and childcare. They were often paid less for doing the same work as men. Women from wealthier families didn't have to work and they had servants to do the housework. However, they weren't supposed to know more than men and their lives were governed by strict rules. They were allowed to do little more than go to parties and visit friends. Whether rich or poor, women in the 19th century were not equal in status to men. Towards the end of the century, women were starting to speak out against this inequality. In particular, women wanted to be able to vote for how the country was governed. They felt that unless they had a say in the laws that ruled their lives, they would never be equal to men. The right to vote in a political election is called suffrage. In 1897, the National Union of Women's Suffrage Societies was formed. They believed that suffrage could be achieved by peaceful means, going on marches, making petitions and writing letters. These women were called suffragists. However, they were unsuccessful. While some men supported equal suffrage, many others didn't think women were knowledgeable enough or could be trusted with important decisions which would affect the ruling of the country. What do you think of this viewpoint? Emmeline Pankhurst was born in 1858. She was involved in the women's suffrage societies from an early age. However, she grew very frustrated with the lack of progress made by the NUWSS. In 1903, she began her own group, the Women's Social and Political Union. Emmeline believed that a more forceful approach had to be taken in order to secure the vote for women. Their motto was, "Deeds, not words." What do you think this means? The WSPU became known for their militant actions. The word militant is used to describe people who try to achieve their aims in extreme ways that other people might find unacceptable. Some members used violent tactics, including smashing windows and assaulting police officers during rallies. Rallies are a mass meeting of people supporting a cause. They were often arrested and sentenced to time in jail for their actions. As a protest of their imprisonment, many of the women went on hunger strike. They refused to eat. When the force feeding of these women failed, a law had to be passed which meant that they were released until they recovered and then re-arrested. This was commonly known as the Cat and Mouse Act. In 1910, a group of MPs formed which supported women's suffrage. They promised to work with the WSPU to resolve the issue. As a result of this, Emmeline agreed to stop militant action. The MPs suggested a law which stated that only women who were unmarried property owners would get the vote. Emmeline was not satisfied with this, and so the WSPU began protesting again. Later that year, a huge protest outside Parliament was carried out. The police used force against the women. 150 arrests were made, and Emmeline's sister died from the injuries she received that day. How do you think Emmeline felt after this protest? In 1912, Emmeline was arrested for smashing the windows of the Prime Minister's home in Downing Street, and she was jailed for 2 months. In defence of the WSPU's actions, Emmeline stated, "We are here not because we are law breakers. We are here in our efforts to become law makers." What does Emmeline mean? Do you agree with her? By 1913, the WSPU were using ever more militant tactics, including cutting telephone wires, damaging artworks, and setting fire to unoccupied government buildings. One of the most controversial acts was carried out by WSPU member Emily Davison at the Epsom Derby. She jumped in front of the King's horse during a race. She suffered a fractured skull and died in hospital 4 days later. Emily was known for her extreme tactics, and she'd been arrested 9 times before this. No one's quite sure what Emily's intentions had been though. Some think she was trying to attach a banner to the horse, others that she was trying to pull the horse down. At her funeral, tens of thousands of people lined the streets as her coffin was transported to the church. These extreme activities divided the group, and they lost some of their supporters who also stopped donating money to the cause. Many men who opposed women's suffrage used their violent actions as proof that women could not be trusted to be calm and rational enough to vote. The WSPU's actions attracted lots of publicity. They saw it as their only way to ensure that their cause got the recognition and attention it deserved. But what do you think? By 1914, 11 years after the WSPU first formed, women still did not have the vote in Britain. In this year, a big event happened that changed everything. The First World War began. This affected the lives of everyone in Britain. All men between the ages of 18 and 41 were called to join the army to fight for their country. The WSPU stopped their protests and focused instead on helping the country to get through the war. They encouraged women to help with industrial production and urged young men to fight. Emmeline Pankhurst said, "What is the use of fighting for a vote if we have not got a country to vote in?" With so many men away at war, women had to take over the jobs that the men had been doing. They worked on the farms, ensuring that there was still enough food for people to eat. They took over many public service roles, such as bus and train drivers and police officers. Women worked in shops, mills and factories, doing the jobs that men had been doing. As well as taking over all the usual jobs that were needed to keep Britain going, women were also employed to help the war effort. They worked in munitions factories, so that's factories where military equipment such as bombs and guns are made. They worked as nurses, both in Britain and in other parts of the world. They made items such as clothes and shoes to send to soldiers. And they worked as mechanics and engineers to make parts for and build trucks, cars, aeroplanes and tanks. The First World War finally ended more than 4 years after it began, on 11th of November 1918. After the war was over, it was impossible for the government to ignore the contribution women had made to the war effort, or to claim that women were incapable of doing the same jobs or having the same responsibilities as men. Also, after the devastating effects of the war, the last thing the government needed was more trouble from the WSPU. The Representation of the People Act was passed in 1918. It gave the right to vote to women who were over the age of 30 and who were over the age of 21 who were homeowners or married to a homeowner. What do you think Emmeline Pankhurst thought about this law? Do you think she was happy with it? Well, Emmeline had this to say. It's not perfect, but this law is a significant step in our struggle. Why did she say it wasn't perfect? Ten years later, in 1928, the Equal Franchise Act was passed. This finally gave women the same voting rights as men. It meant that any woman over the age of 21 could vote in Britain. Unfortunately, Emmeline grew ill and died just 3 weeks before this was announced. She was 69 years old. Newspapers around the world praised her work on behalf of women's rights, even if they didn't agree with the methods she used. Now it's your turn to do some independent work on the fight for the right of women to vote. Well, we've just learnt an awful lot about women's suffrage and the life of Emmeline Pankhurst, her lifelong fight to secure the right to vote for women. Now it's time for today's activity. On screen now is an information sheet which we've included with the resources that come with this lesson. And it summarises and retells quite a lot of the information that we've just gone through on the slides. For today's task, you're going to need to familiarise yourself with that information and make sure you really understand it. So, you can read through this information sheet. There's 2 sides to it. There's the other side now. Alternatively, you could look back through the slides. We've included those with the resources as well. Either way, take your time to make sure you understand the information. If you need to, ask an adult for help. Now let's look at your task. Having read through all of that information and made sure that you really understand it, it's time for your task. You must decide whether you think the actions of the WSPU or the actions of women during the war had the most influence on the decision to give women the vote. Which one do you think was more influential? Once you've decided, tick the appropriate box on this worksheet. Then underneath, there's space for you to explain your reasoning. I'll just read through this now. I think that the actions of the WSPU, or women during the war, had the most influence on the decision to give women the right to vote. This is because, and then you can explain why, in your opinion, that choice of yours was the most influential. Don't forget to ask an adult for help if there's anything that you're not sure about. And don't forget as well that you can help yourself by looking back through that information sheet or the slides. If you're unable to print this worksheet out or any of the other resources, or you just don't want to, that's absolutely fine. You can just look at them on screen and then you can write on paper, in a notebook, or even do your work on computer. After today's lesson, you might like to continue learning about women's suffrage and the life of Emmeline Pankhurst. What do you think she was actually like in person? Would you like to have met her? If so, what questions would you have asked her? Think about those questions and jot them down. Imagine that you're a reporter at the time. What questions would you ask Emmeline Pankhurst? Thanks for joining me for this Learn at Home lesson. You'll find more information about this lesson as well as others in the series in the description below the video. And if you've not yet got your hands on the resources I was just showing you, or maybe you've just come across this video for the first time, stick around to find out how you can download the Learn at Home lesson packs, as well as accessing thousands of resources which are absolutely ideal for teaching and learning in school or at home from PlanBee.com. For more information, advice and resources for learning at home, search for PlanBee or visit PlanBee.com. The Home Education page is packed with information about how we can help you with teaching your children at home. As well as thousands of premium resources, including the Learn at Home lesson packs which accompany these videos, there are hundreds of free resources available to download as well. Don't forget to check the links and information in the description below this video for other ways in which PlanBee can help you with learning at home.